Hi everybody, it's Wednesday the 10th of June and today we're going to be writing a poem based on the poem Jabberwocky. Okay, so before we start to write our poem, I just want to give you a bit more information about it. The poem Jabberwocky is a ballad. Traditionally, a ballad tells a story of love or adventure and is divided into 4-line stanzas or verses that obey a specific rhyme scheme and metre. It has 7 quatrains. Quatrain means a stanza or verse of 4 lines, especially one that has alternate rhymes. Now, you might remember that in the poem Jabberwocky, lines 1 and 3 rhyme and 2 and 4. Sometimes there are rhymes within a line too. Our poem also describes an adventure. A boy is warned about a monster, goes off to hunt it and returns victorious, having killed it. You can listen to it again on the next slide if you want to check whether you agree with this. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave, all mimsy were the borogoves, and the mom raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the maxim foe he sought. So rested he by the tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker, snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, callooh, callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave, all mimsy were the borogoves, and the mom raths outgrabe. Okay, so far this week we have decided on a setting for our poem. We've written verses 1 and 7 based on this setting, and we've also created 3 creatures for our poem and added details about one of them. The next step is to write the rest of the poem. On the next slide, you can listen to my poem, set in a cave and featuring the creatures I described to you earlier in the week. I have explained some of the choices which I made whilst writing it to help you when you write yours. 'Twas Mercamp, and the shrinkled blats did scrawl and squawkle in the glark, all speary were the shadowets, and the deethal spithers racked. Beware the slubberwick, my girl, the slime that burns, the teeth that rip. Beware the Arkmar bird, and watch the horriest ticky whip. She took her clumping axe in hand, long time the gruesome beast she sought. So rested she by the jindal tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought she stood, the slubberwick, with eyes of death, came slibbering through the mirksome cave, and whippled with its breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, and more, the clumping axe went thwicka thwack. She left it dead, and with its head she went scampounding back. And hast thou slain the slubberwick? Come to my arms, my one-dayed girl. O splendious day, faboo, fillet, he chucklined with a twirl. 'Twas Mercamp, and the shrinkled blats did scrawl and squawkle in the glark, all speary were the shadowets, and the deethal spithers racked. On this slide you can see that I've highlighted some of it in blue. I'm going to talk about it and hope that's going to help you when you're composing your poem. First of all, it's absolutely fine to keep some of the language from the original verses. You can see in verse 4 I've kept the same first line, and as in uffish thought she stood. I found it too hard to think of something different. Also, in verse 6, I've kept most of it the same, and just change particular words. So in the original poem, it says, "O frabjous day, Callooh, Calais, he chortled in his joy." I've kept the same idea, but made some different portmanteau words. "O splendious day, Faboo, Fallet." And then I've thought of different words for that second line. He chucklined with a twirl. My word chucklined is a mixture of chuckle and grinned. I used twirl because I needed it to rhyme with girl in line 2. Also, throughout the poem, you'll see that my pronouns have changed from he to she. That's because I decided that in this ballad, I was going to use a girl. Also, in verse 4, in the original version, it says the Jabberwock with eyes of flame. Now you might remember that in my discussion, I wrote that the Slubberwick had eyes of death. So this was not going to rhyme with the original unburbled as it came. So I thought of a different verb, and I thought my Slubberwick would whipple along, and I said it whippled with its breath. So then I have carried on with my rhyme, death and breath. Finally, in verse 5 at the beginning, the original says 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker, snack. I've kept it very simple and used the same idea, but changed it slightly to 1, 2, 3, 4, and more and more. The clumping axe went thwicker, thwack. So the thwack still rhymes with back in line 4. Okay, so your job today is to write your own poem. You can use the skeleton on the next slide to help, and there's also a copy of it on the website which you can print out if you are able to. Remember, you have already written verses 1 and 7. This frame might help you structure and write your poem. If there are other words and lines you want to replace with your ideas, that is fine. Remember that we are writing a ballad, so there needs to be an element of adventure in it. Also, think about the rhythm and rhyme as you write. Keep rereading it out loud as you go. Here are some tips which might help you. Use an online thesaurus to help you look for different words to combine. Use a rough piece of paper to jot ideas down. And don't be afraid to keep some of the original lines in the poem if it helps with the rhyming. Remember that you might have to try different ideas before you get the words and rhymes which work. This is an important part of the writing process and is exactly what published poets and writers have to do when they write. Okay, so now have a break from your poem and leave it somewhere safe until tomorrow. On Thursday, we will be rereading them, editing them and publishing. And after that, we would like to see your finished creations.